what is the word? But you're taking a moment to review yourself. So, people usually, when it's a person giving the class, they would think that, oh, these are the people that are the best, that are the best. And it's kind of like how I used to view when I went to Kulit Sharia, and I used to think, wow, those are professors in Sharia. They must be saints walking on ground. And I know that that's how people would think, that if you're given a class on Islam, you memorize the Quran, you know the words of the Quran, then therefore you should have all that vibe, you should have all those feelings and all those different things. But it isn't until you start noticing that these people as I am, and that they
Yeah.
have their weaknesses, they have their moments, they have these things. And it's the same thing here. You've got your moment, you've got your shortcomings. No matter who you are, you've got your shortcomings. So when I'm giving the class, it's just, bringing in that moment of reflection, really, where it's taking a moment to reflect. It's not, I know many times people would think that I'm, talking to them, and it's like somebody talking from, like a pedestal, and somebody talking from up to the bottom or to the other lower people. That isn't actually the case. It's sometimes using the Quran words in, it's that narrative. You're using the Quran words to speak, but I'm also listening as everybody else is listening. So I'm just using the Quranic words where to wa'mur ahlaka, and order your people and order your family, etc. So I'm just translating and interpreting those words, but it doesn't mean that I put myself on a pedestal, because at the end of the day, no matter who you are as human as can be. And um, no matter how hard you worked, you're always going to discover that you have your shortcomings. You lack ilm on so many different things. Even if you had the ilm, there's a difference between having the ilm and remembering the ilm when it's time to remember the ilm. That is a huge difference. Like, you could know that al-adala and justice is is part of Islam and part of the tenets of Islam, but then when it comes to the time to actually practice it, you will give yourself these these justifications to why you are practicing justice. You will give yourself the justification. And the same thing, you can give classes on parenting, but then when you are on the spot, it is so easy to slip. You can give classes on all these ways of dealing with your wife, your husband, all these different things, but then you'll discover that you'll discover that it's not a lesson to teach. It's, you'll discover that when you're talking about a lot of different issues, whether we're talking about sabr, we're talking about taqwa, it's not a lecture to give. It's absolutely not a lecture to give. It's something to live. And that's why making the dua always, Allahumma inni as'aluka fi'l al-khayrat. Ya Allah, I ask you to make me from those that, or for, to make me from those that practice and do the good things, because you can know what's good and not do it. So being humble is very important. And that moment, I know there are many out there that already know what we're saying and already know the tafsir, and they could just open up any book and actually read it out of a tafsir book. And many of you know Arabic, so you could easily get to a lot of the references. But it's a moment to revive our spirituality. It's a moment to, let us rethink a lot of the different things. It's a moment to, it's not always to get the ilm. It's to remember what you have learned. It's to let you be transparent with yourself, and to take a moment to rethink on a lot of the things that you're doing. It's a moment to reflect on, those reminders that at many times you can forget about. It's so easy for us to forget. We would be busy with our children, busy with our lives, busy with so many different things that we're doing, and it's so easy to forget. It is so easy to forget. And many times people would think, well, it's just, what else am I gonna learn? Yeah, it's asking me to do taqwa. Okay, then what? Anything else? Anything new? Well, that's why you read the Quran over and over, because it's a reminder. It's a reminder. It's to help you take a moment to reflect on your life, on the purpose, on every single moment. And there is, this is وذكر فإن الذكرى تنفع المؤمنين, because reminder itself will benefit those that are mu'mineen. You always need that time. And that's why Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, if we go back to the tafsir right now, since that's what we're doing. فاصبر على ما يقولون. فاصبر على ما يقولون, meaning, and be patient on what they're saying. Be patient on what they're saying. Take that moment. Now, when we talk about sabr, فاصبر على ما يقولون, because it's a moment in where the Prophet ﷺ himself was definitely, as any other human, was definitely being harmed. He was definitely, getting affected because of what they're saying. It's harming the person, maybe not necessarily harming the spirituality, but when your body is aching, when your psychology is aching, your spirituality will also ache. And that's why it's also important to make the dua on, making sure that, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will keep the masa'ib, will keep the calamities away from you, because you not being able to focus on your spirituality can be influenced by having these different calamities around you. It could be a calamity in your wealth. It could be a calamity with your children, the different fitan around you, with your children probably, not growing up as you wished. It's so easy when we don't have the children, we would have all these different theories of raising children to being, huffaz, to being ulama. You'll have all these theories. It is so easy to have that theory. But in practice, you will realize that it's not always you that chooses. You can choose a route, a path, a purpose, a destination that you want your children to grow up in, but they don't always go and grow in what you want them to grow in. It is so easy. It is so easy to put theories. This is what you should be doing. This is how things work, and all these different things. But when you put it into practice, well, they're going to refuse. They're going to reject. They're going to easily get distracted with what their friends are doing, with the people around them are doing, or even with entertainment. Even if you say, well, I'm going to take out the entertainment, it is so easy for them to find any other entertainment. The mind can find its ways of distraction without us realizing. So it's so easy to put all those theories. And that's why I always say, when we look at fasbar ala ma yaqulun, it's not an issue here when we talk about fasbar, having the patience. It's not a lecture to give. It's not a lecture to give. It's actually shown in behavior. It's shown in practice. Whether we're talking about sabr ala al-alam, having patience on pain, or patience on the calamities that surround us, sabr is not a lecture to talk about. It's shown into practice. And that's why when the Prophet ﷺ was making Allahumma inni as'aluka fi'l al-khayrat wa tark al-munkarat wa hubb al-masakin, and loving al-masakin, that was actually teaching us that there's something that you would have to learn by working hands-on. The hands-on is really important in where you are in direct contact with people that are practicing patience, with people that are tasting patience, that are tasting pains, that are tasting all those different calamities. It's not a lecture, but you need to see it, to feel it, to get an understanding. No matter how how eloquent you were to describe certain things. There are certain things that you can't really describe until you go through it. So here the Prophet ﷺ himself, he was he was being inflicted with this with that harm because they were rejecting him. And it was definitely rubbing on his psychology. It was rubbing, he's a normal human being. It was rubbing on him. He was hurt because these people were rejecting the words that he was trying to tell them about Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So here Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala was telling him, فَاصْبِرْ عَلَى مَا يَقُولُونَ. Be patient on what they're saying. What does being patient mean? Sabr in itself actually means al-habs. And al-habs means to control, to imprison, to put within a certain area. So that's what sabr means. So when we're putting all that in a specific area, we're putting our feelings in a specific area, that would also mean that you're controlling your feelings from them controlling you, from the emotions controlling you to you controlling the emotions. And that's the difference between a lot of the psychology, that sociology, psychology, and the different therapy that the Western psychology is based on, and between the Islamic psychology. Islamic psychology is all about putting you and giving you the coping skill to cope with the different hardships and calamities around you and not surrender to them. In the Western psychology, it's a little different. Yes, they will train you on how to do the coping skills, but a lot of times it's trying to distance yourself from the different hardships that you're facing and trying to do that therapy in that way. In Islam, no. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gave you that coping skill, and therefore taught you فَاصْبِرْ عَلَى مَا يَقُولُونَ. The word sabr is constantly mentioned in da'wah, in pains, in facing Allah. What is sabr? Sabr is hanging in there. And when we speak about sabr involves a number of different corners. Sabr on pains, by not complaining about it. Sabr on masa'ib, sabr on challenges that you might be facing. Challenges raising your children, challenges, with your job, challenges with the people around you. Those are different challenges. And there's also a sabr on doing what is haqq, doing what is right. A sabr on doing what is right involves that you don't change the principle in order to, because you're not able to cope, or in order to fit and not face that challenge. When we talk about the sabr in doing what is right, maybe sabr in, yes, I need to wear hijab, I need to do my salah, I need to probably stay away from haram, and that's the fourth type of sabr, in where the sabr to stay away from al-muharramat, in controlling your own inclinations. That sabr. So we've got 4 different types of sabr, and all are called one word, because without you practicing that sabr in those 4 different corners, then you're not really going to teach yourself that coping or strengthening the coping abilities. In order to strengthen those coping skills, you have to stay within that area and not necessarily pull yourself out of it. We're seeing so many younger generation right now leaving their homes, leaving their families, because she couldn't cope dealing with her mother, and the other person couldn't cope dealing with their father. So they basically left the household and decided that, oh, my psychologist told me that I have to leave the area. And then would assume, oftentimes when they would call me, they would assume that, oh, that I'm going to say that, oh, is that what science says? Well, yeah, then it's okay, then you can leave. Islam has a totally different ground. Islam has a totally different ground. Islam has a totally different destination. And no, even if a psychologist said, yes, you should leave your parent, in Islam, we're not going to give that fatwa, even if they had said that. Because the Western psychology is based on individualism, is based on people are matter in motion. It has a foundation that science saw the world through. There's a specific lens: individualism, existentialism, and the list goes on and on. In Islam, we don't see the world through that lens. We see the world through the lens that those hardships are actually part of the test that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is testing you in. And in order to go up in living the principle, in order to live up to that principle, you can't just run away from it, because you will always be behind in living up to the principle. In order to live up to the principle, you have to put yourself in that challenge and work on enhancing your coping skills and not running away from them. You can't run away from your parent simply because she's always asking you to clean your room, or simply because she's always asking you to do certain things that you consider yourself, I can't cope with it. She's telling me too much. In Islam, that person is considered وَقَضَى رَبُّكَ أَلَّا تَعْبُدُوا إِلَّا إِيَّاهُ وَبِالْوَالِدَيْنِ إِحْسَانًا. These are just some of the things that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala had decreed, that you only worship Him. And you act kindly with your parents. When you look at those different sides of sabr, and the sabr on the hardship that the people around you are putting on you, the hardship where, yes, people are not liking the way that I practice Islam. I'm constantly being told that I'm too extreme, I'm too strict, I'm too this. You will be losing your friends. This is absolutely normal to lose a lot of people out there, because most people live based on entertainment. Most people live based on looking for enjoyment. In Islam, the story is totally different, where you look through enjoyment from a different corner. And that corner in Islam is the corner where you look through the lens of coping, staying away from the different muharramat and manipulations, and then that will take you into tasting the joy of al-Iman. Tasting the joy of al-Iman, that's a totally different feeling. That's a totally different route. Not many will enjoy it, or at least not many will get the chance to enjoy it or even sense it, because not many are going to take that sabr, are going to take that hanging in there, that patience, to stay away from the different inclinations, because most people are rushing. Most people would rather rush to eat a donut, for example, than actually be patient and stay away from eating those sugars and actually eat something that is healthy. When will they taste the impact or the sweetness in that abstination? When they abstained from eating a donut, they won't really taste it until further years down, when their body, when others' bodies, those that were eating and living to their pleasures, when their bodies start falling down, that's when your body will prove that you're now harvesting the sweetness of that sabr that you worked on. And that's the same thing. Everything in this world works in a pattern. This pattern that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is telling us about is also the pattern within Iman, in where فَاصْبِرْ عَلَى مَا يَقُولُونَ وَسَبِّحْ بِحَمْدِ رَبِّكَ قَبْلَ طُلُوعِ الشَّمْسِ وَقَبْلَ غُرُوبِهَا. There are things, elements, ways in order to help you do that coping. That coping can only be achieved by changing your perspective. Changing the perspective, meaning changing the angle in where you see the different things around you. For example, the reason why we would feel the lack of sabr is because we're focusing, for example, on the challenge, or probably on the pain, or probably on the loss. We're focusing on that. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is telling us, don't focus on that. Focus on the achievement. Focusing on the achievement is the key to help you realize on making that achievement happen. And that's the same thing. فَاصْبِرْ عَلَى مَا يَقُولُونَ. Be patient on what they're saying. In other words, don't let it weaken you. وَسَبِّحْ بِحَمْدِ رَبِّكَ. What is that? سَبِّحْ بِحَمْدِ رَبِّكَ, in where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is teaching us. Focus on the right corner. What corner is that? That corner is look at the great things that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala had created for you. Sabbih bihamdi rabbik. Feel that connection between you and the Lord Almighty by looking at the blessings in order to help you cope with the different challenges, the 4 different challenges that we talked about. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is telling you, look at the corner of blessings around you. وَسَبِّحْ بِحَمْدِ رَبِّكَ. And connect with your Lord Almighty and practice what the angels themselves were doing. The word sabbih comes from the root sabaha. The word sabaha means to glide, but sabbih, whenever you see a shadda on a verb, that means there's that repetition. So there's that repetition. Sabbih, make that the repetitive manner, make that as a repetitive action that you do, in where you're constantly thinking of the good things, you're constantly thanking. You're constantly thinking, in remembering the good things and glorifying your Lord Almighty by focusing on the good things, then focusing on the evils of the different things that are harming you. But that's not once or twice, but that has to be a regimen. That has to be a pattern that you follow throughout. قبل طلوع الشمس, before sunrise. Why before sunrise? Because when the sun rises, you're already into that activity mode, into that mode where you're already going into that action. And so Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, قَبْلَ طُلُوعِ الشَّمْسِ, before your body is preparing itself to go into action, prepare yourself with the power, energize yourself with sabbih bihamdi rabbik. Bring in that energy. It's just like any other activity. Before you start your workout, what do? Well, you take a protein, you take something to help you start going, and then قبل غروبها, before sunset. Before sunset, قبل غروبها, before you even go into the mode of shutdown, start also go into the mode of connecting with your Lord Almighty with tasbih, not any other tasbih, but the tasbih in bihamdi rabbik. Bihamdi rabbik, where you remember the glorifications, you remember the things that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala had blessed you with. وَمِنْ آنَاءِ اللَّيْلِ. Not only that, but also آنَاءِ اللَّيْلِ. Take moments even during the night to help you get into the coping, to help enhance your coping abilities. Also آنَاءِ اللَّيْلِ, during the night. Don't get distracted by thinking about the harmful things, but آنَاءِ اللَّيْلِ فَسَبِّحْ بِحَمْدِ رَبِّكَ. Then فَسَبِّحْ بِحَمْدِ رَبِّكَ. Then فَسَبِّحْ بِحَمْدِ رَبِّكَ here. فَسَبِّحْ, it is also connecting it with سَبِّحْ بِحَمْدِ رَبِّكَ. It is telling you, do it again, and do it again, and do it even during the night. وَأَطْرَافَ النَّهَارِ, and during different moments, during النهار, during daylight. لَعَلَّكَ تَرْضَى. Why لَعَلَّكَ تَرْضَى? This is really important. Remember, the word فَصْبِر is في مقابل, it is in contrast when you're not feeling content. So why do you have sabr? You're not fully content. You're feeling sorrow. You're feeling harmed. You're feeling the pain. You're feeling weak. So that's why you end up going into sabr. But Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is telling you, well, those are the key things to help you choose from a moment or flip that moment of weakness into a moment of rida, into a moment of content, into a moment where you're feeling that power again. لَعَلَّكَ تَرْضَى, perhaps, or it may lead you to feeling content. What is it doing? What is that dhikr doing? That dhikr is helping you get into that coping skill, into that coping ability. And that's why Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala even talked about those that will be facing the different hardships, and where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala actually said that that they actually use salah, in order to help them, go into that coping abilities. And when we speak about um, الرضا is a different level than sabr. So there's the sabr. Sabr is one level. الرضا is a higher level. What's the difference between these two? Sabr is, there are different ways to it, because there could be a sabr, you're hanging in there because you have no choice. There's the sabr where you do have a choice, but you're not really able to take that choice. So you're hanging in there. You're trying to cope the different hardships. This is a sabr. The sabr in where, one, you're not constantly complaining. You're not complaining, and you're trying to hide your emotions in different ways. So that's a sabr. You're trying to figure out. You're waiting for time to pass in order for you to have that hardship go away. That's a sabr. Rida is actually a higher level, because rida is a moment where you are happy with the hardship. You're starting to see the hardship as a blessing. Look at the difference. Sabr, you see it as a moment of weakness, but rida, you're seeing that hardship as a blessing. You're starting to change that lens, that perspective, that focal point of focus, from it being focused on the evil side to it being focused on, well, there's probably good in it. Well, I'm going to be positive and know this is a blessing. To look at pains as blessings, to see the death of a child as a blessing, to see the death of a family member as a blessing. Yes, it might seem wicked, but it's actually looking at it as, yes, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala put this hardship, but it's inshallah, because I trust Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He will not prick me with something evil, but I trust Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So I changed the focal point from the focus of looking at it as a challenge to seeing it as a place that will probably get me even higher in my rank in the akhirah, or even in the dunya. Well, let's continue. ولا تمدن عينيك إلى ما متعنا به أزواجا منهم زهرة الحياة الدنيا لنفتنهم فيه ورزق ربك خير وأبقى. What does that mean? During that moment that you're practicing sabr, and this sabr that the Prophet ﷺ was being taught to work on, was the sabr in what they were talking about, how they were rejecting da'wah. Because to the Prophet ﷺ, the biggest calamity was not being poor, was not in the pains that he was feeling, but it was because they were rejecting his words, and he was trying to lead them to haqq. That was the biggest pain that he was facing. So here Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala teaching him and teaching us, وَلَا تَمُدَّنَّ عَيْنَيْكَ. Here's what happens. Oftentimes, and many times, it can happen where we would only see the pains and we would look at others. Wow, they're lucky. I wish I had what they had. So here Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, وَلَا تَمُدَّنَّ عَيْنَيْكَ. Don't even look at مَا مَتَّعْنَا بِهِ أَزْوَاجًا مِّنْهُمْ. Don't look at the things that they were given. مَتَّعْنَا, what they were enjoying their wives, their husbands. It's all زهرة الحياة الدنيا. It's all just like the fruit, one side that you see from their enjoyment. But you only see the zahra. You only see the tip of it. You don't really see the details of how all this that they were given is actually لِنَفْتِنَهُمْ فِيهِ, is actually a test and a struggle that they're actually facing. Wait a minute, how is that related to the ayah before it? Remember this. Here, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is exactly giving us the same exact muqabala, the same exact pattern in where the Prophet ﷺ says, عَجَبًا لِأَمْرِ الْمُؤْمِنِ. A believer is very strange, is not like anybody else. لأمر المؤمن إن أمره كله له خير. All the matters for a believer are actually good. If إذا أصابته سراء شكر, when good things happen to him, they'll be very thankful. And if إذا أصابته ضراء صبر, and when evil things prick them, they'll be patient. Why? Because they're always focusing on how to see things in their realities. So here Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala was again teaching us, don't look at what beauties and bounties that they have. Those bounties are just the tip of the different things on life, but the reality is actually different. لِنَفْتِنَهُمْ فِيهِ. As a matter of fact, they're actually facing a struggle in it. You could see that they have cars, they have beautiful houses, they have all these different bounties around them, but you won't realize that they're actually living a lot of hardship, that they're actually facing lots of struggles, psychological depression and different feelings on the inside, where it might even lead them to anxiety, and still facing anxiety, and still facing depression, and still facing suicide and all that, and trying to run away by using intoxications to run away from the anxiety, even though they actually have the means, the materialistic means at least, to what we would think is supposed to lead to the person being stable, living a stable life, content. They've got the degree, they've got the money, they've got the wives, they've got the cars, they've got all the different means, but they're not feeling that happiness. They're not feeling that satisfaction. They're not feeling that fulfillment. لِنَفْتِنَهُمْ فِيهِ. They're actually feeling a fitna, that anxiety, because a Muslim, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is teaching us how to correct our perspective. Don't look at the materialistic things and think that they are the means for happiness. That's not what it means to be happy. What it means to be happy is to live on the principle and to connect with your Lord Almighty. That's what brings in the ultimate happiness, which is الرضا, the satisfaction. الرضا, the satisfaction. In the beginning it might feel painful, but once you grow in your coping ability to do sabr, that's when there's a higher chance of you reaching that rida, you reaching that content feeling, that happiness. How do we get there? وَرِزْقُ رَبِّكَ خَيْرٌ وَأَبْقَى. And رزق ربك, meaning that moment that you would think that, oh, they're so lucky to have all this. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is telling you, وَرِزْقُ رَبِّكَ خَيْرٌ وَأَبْقَى. And the rizq, the different bounties that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala would give you, khair, are actually better, وَأَبْقَى, and they will even last longer. Just like when we say, easy come, easy go. You might be so happy about all the wealth and those beautiful wives that they have, but are they lasting? Is that going to be stable? Or is it going to go away? You know, it's it's such a blessing to it's a blessing and a challenge. Sorry about that. It's a blessing and a challenge to hear people's problems. And it's a blessing because you will learn. You will learn when you're hearing people's problems, and when you're listening to people's pains, you will learn to see that you're so blessed with what you have. And when you learn in direct contact with those that are facing those hardships, you will learn a very important lesson. There are so many homes that on the outside it's a beautiful mansion. On the outside, they've got the money, they've got the degrees, and then on social media, they'll post, my son graduated from that, and my daughter, and etc. And to the public, it looks like, wow, they're so lucky. They don't have any problems. But because I deal with people's problems, I learned that what you see on the outside is totally different than what you see on the inside. You can have just a few things to eat and a very simple home to live in, but you can have the health. Or you can probably have good children. And subhanallah, in Arabic, we say الرجال لا يربيهم إلا الحزن, that if you want true men, they will not become true men until they pass stages and stages of hardships. That's how they become these true men. Same thing with girls. In order for them to learn how to manage a lot of different things and become true strong women, they have to go through lots of hardships. And those hardships are things that they learn from home, teaching them how to be independent, how to cope, and how to overcome different challenges from their early childhood. It's not about feeding them entertainment. Feeding them entertainment is going to grow one thing in them, the love of entertainment. You will not learn how to go outside of entertainment and actually live the challenge and act responsibly until you see that responsibility grew one thing in you, which is maturity. Responsibility makes you a mature person. Responsibility grows in you that ability to face challenges, to see the challenges in the reality that they're in, which is we're able to go beyond it. We're able to pass it. It's just a matter of time. And that's why رزق ربك خير وأبقى. The rizq al-halal is what will be better and will always last longer. It won't go away easily, but it will last longer. Rizq Rabbik is not the only thing that will last longer, but also when you teach your children, when you teach yourself, and when you feed from the rizq of your Lord Almighty, when you feed on good things, that will last longer. When you teach your children adab and akhlaq al-Islam, and you let them feed on Islam, and you feed yourself on Islamic discipline, that will last longer. But if we're so concerned about getting degrees in secular studies and engineering and doctor and medical degrees and all that stuff, but when it comes to learning Quran, or when it comes to learning Hadith, oh, we'll learn that, from different ways, or we'll take a moment, or whenever we have the time. that won't last long in helping you cope. رزق ربك خير وأبقى. I'm not saying there's no khair in that. There's definitely khair in it. But are we right now so keen on dunya and not focused on akhirah? Taking the moment to focus on the akhirah is actually abqa. It will last longer because it will last to pass the dunya into going even into the akhirah. وَأْمُرْ أَهْلَكَ بِالصَّلَاةِ. All those moments that we can go through, we need coping skills in our family. وَأْمُرْ أَهْلَكَ بِالصَّلَاةِ. And order أهلك, أهلك, your wife, your spouse, your children, بالصلاة, order them, train them to do salah, because with the challenging life that they will be facing, you want to put in the foundation of coping, taking a moment to reflect and taking the moment to change the lens from the lens of looking at the hardship into the lens of looking at Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen, into the lens of constantly remembering all praises to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. When do you say Alhamdulillah Rabbil Alameen? When you see a bounty. But where is the bounty that was mentioned in Surah Al-Fatiha? It just told you, no, you have to start with it. Start by correcting the lens in where you see the world in. Alhamdulillah Rabbil Alameen. Allahu Akbar. It's telling you, take that moment to learn how to see everything small, and that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is beyond everything around you. Beyond everything around you, and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is the greatest. وَأْمُرْ أَهْلَكَ بِالصَّلَاةِ. And order them to do the salah. وَاصْطَبِرْ عَلَيْهَا. Stabir alayha. Why is stabir alayha? Istabir is different than just do sabr. Istabir meaning it needs more and more practice. It needs lots of moments to practice. And here, wastabir alayha, in where you're taking a moment, taking a moment to teach yourself how to obey that feeling where you want to cope. So what does it mean? You can say, I'm coping, but you need to therapy. You need to teach yourself how to put in the ability to cope. It is exactly like where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is actually telling us, Ya ayyuhal muzammil, qum al-layla illa qalila, teaching yourself that ability to cope in where, just like you want to, Muzammil, he was hiding, he was supposed to convey the message, so Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala was telling him, قُمِ اللَّيْلَ إِلَّا قَلِيلًا, do qiyam al-layl. That's going to help you face the challenges that you'll be facing when you're actually doing all that da'wah. لا نسألك رزقا نحن نرزقك. We don't ask you to bring about rizq. In other words, your life, the most important task that you carry was not to find a job. Although that is important, but الطلب التكليفي, but what you were ordered with was not to look for a job, because لا نسألك رزقا. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is telling us, لا نسألك رزقا. We're not asking you for money. In other words, your main job, your main task in this world was not to look for a job. نحن نرزقك. In fact, we'll give you the rizq. What is that equivalent to? That ayah is very equivalent to the ayah mentioned in Surah Al-Isra. وَمَا خَلَقْتُ الْجِنَّ وَالْإِنسَ إِلَّا this is, I believe, Surah Al-Dariyat. وَمَا خَلَقْتُ الْجِنَّ وَالْإِنسَ إِلَّا لِيَعْبُدُونَ مَا أُرِيدُ مِنْهُمْ مِنْ رِزْقٍ وَمَا أُرِيدُ أَن يُطْعِمُونَ إِنَّ اللَّهَ هُوَ الرَّزَّاقُ ذُو الْقُوَّةِ الْمَتِينُ. Very equivalent to this ayah, where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, and I have only created the jinn and the ins, humans, only to worship Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And I don't ask them to bring me rizq, to bring me any wealth. And I'm not asking them to feed me, because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is the one that gives rizq. Does that mean we shouldn't be working, or we should be just working on salah? That's not what the ayah is saying. But what the ayah is saying is that make sure that you understand your priorities. Make sure you understand your priorities, that your priority is not to get a degree, to get a job, to get money, to build, to do this, because that's how much time you will be spending. You will be spending in building your life. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is telling you, don't let that be your focus. Let your focus be وَالْعَاقِبَةُ لِلتَّقْوَى. الْعَاقِبَة, the ending, the true harvest that you will be doing is taqwa. الْعَاقِبَة لِلتَّقْوَى. This is talking about the true harvest, because what people usually harvest, like in the beginning of their 20s, they're looking for a job, and then once they get a job, they're starting to grow in their job. In their 30s, the money is starting to get collected. In their 40s, now they've got a good amount of money. In their 50s, oh, now it's time to marry a second wife, or in the 40s, it's time to marry a second wife. In their 40s, it's okay, I've got everything. I've got all the money. I've got all the different things. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is saying, وَالْعَاقِبَةُ لِلتَّقْوَى. Don't focus on growing your wealth, and because what you were wanting to get during your 40s and during your 50s was really to grow in wealth and different bounties. But Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is telling you, وَالْعَاقِبَةُ لِلتَّقْوَى. Focus on taqwa, because that's the biggest harvest that you can get. وَقَالُوا لَوْلَا يَأْتِينَا بِآيَةٍ مِّن رَبِّهِ. Now, when the Prophet ﷺ was giving them the da'wah, was telling them about Islam, they were saying, وَقَالُوا لَوْلَا يَأْتِينَا بِآيَةٍ مِّن رَبِّهِ. They would say, لَوْلَا يَأْتِينَا. But this is not that they were hoping that he would bring about an ayah, but they were here using it as a form. They were using it here as a way of saying, like, if only. It's like, oh no, he's never gonna bring something like that. And here, this is istinkari. It's like, وَقَالُوا لَوْلَا يَأْتِينَا بِآيَةٍ مِّن رَبِّهِ. And they said, if only he would bring some sign from his Lord. أَوَلَمْ تَأْتِهِمْ بَيِّنَةُ مَا فِي الصُّحُفِ الْأُولَى. Did they not receive the messages that were actually sent? أَوَلَمْ تَأْتِهِمْ بَيِّنَةٌ. Did they not receive the messages? Did they not receive the evidences? مَا فِي الصُّحُفِ الْأُولَى. What was sent in the previous scriptures? What was sent in the previous scriptures? Two things were sent in the previous scriptures. One, informing them that there was going to be a prophet that was going to be coming about the Prophet ﷺ. And two, that there was going to be a scripture that was going to inform them about dunya, about the different legislatures that they should be practicing, about the akhirah, etc. وَلَوْ أَنَّا أَهْلَكْنَاهُمْ بِعَذَابٍ مِّن قَبْلِهِ لَقَالُوا رَبَّنَا لَوْلَا أَرْسَلْتَ إِلَيْنَا رَسُولًا فَنَتَّبِعَ آيَاتِكَ مِن قَبْلِ أَن نَّذِلَّ وَنَخْزَى. So here, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is telling us, it's taking us into a shift. وَلَوْ أَنَّا أَهْلَكْنَاهُمْ. If they were destructed during that moment, بِعَذَابٍ مِّن قَبْلِهِ. If they were destructed during that moment, لَقَالُوا رَبَّنَا. And this is also taking us into a shift in where, let's see what will happen at the end. What they will say, لولا أرسلت إلينا رسولا فنتبع آياتك. So here Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is taking us into a shift that they will be saying, if only the Lord Almighty, on Judgment Day, they will be saying, if only the Lord Almighty had sent a prophet and a message, then we would have followed the words that he was sent with before, min qabli an nadhilla wa nakhza, before we would feel this humiliation, nadhilla, this humiliation, wa nakhza. The difference between idhul and al-khizi. Idhul is in itself when they're actually feeling that humility, they're humiliated for knowing the truth but not following it. And nakhza, il-khizi, is how they're amongst those that were losing and not amongst those that were the successful ones. So they're feeling not only humiliated and not only feeling down, but they're feeling in total remorse. but it is too late. So how do we know that here when they were referring تأتيهم بينة, when they were actually saying, oh, we need an ayah, we need an evidence, how do we know what it refers to? So the ayah that completes it here, because they were saying they wanted two things. They were saying they wanted a Rasul and they wanted an ayah. So here when they were saying, لَوْلَا يَأْتِينَا بِآيَةٍ, they were saying, if only we had an ayah, if only we had any evidence, miracles, evidence, or even clarification from the Lord Almighty on to prove this is a true prophet. So here the ayah says, well, they were referring to a prophet, and they were referring to the different legislatures that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala was sending. And here Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is saying, well, two things were actually sent. They were sent, both of them. They were sent, the prophets and the messengers, and they were also sent the different revelations, the different commandments, the different definitions to justice, in order to help them implement the principle that the Lord Almighty wanted them to practice. قُلْ كُلٌّ مُتَرَبِّصٌ فَتَرَبَّصُوا. Now Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is saying, قُلْ كُلٌّ مُتَرَبِّصٌ. Everyone is looking, and everyone is actually put in an awaited time. It's just a moment, certain time for waiting. فَتَرَبَّصُوا. Just wait, watch. فَسَتَعْلَمُونَ مَنْ أَصْحَابُ الصِّرَاطِ السَّوِيِّ وَمَنِ اهْتَدَى. And you will see. This is a warning that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is laying out for the kuffar, and telling them, فَسَتَعْلَمُونَ, and you will know who the people that were actually following الصراط السوي. What is الصراط السوي? الصراط is the path. السوي is the straight path. What is the straight path? In order to call any path straight, you always need to know what crookedness is. You can't know what goodness, or what the good things and righteousness is, unless you know what evil is, unless you know what wronghood is. If you can't admit that that is wronghood, then are you able to distinguish it from righteousness? You're not. And that's why Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, وَمَنِ اهْتَدَى, and who was guided, because you can know الصراط السوي, you are able to know the true path, but you may not follow it. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is saying, Man ashabu الصراط السوي, who really is following the true path and who's really guided to follow it. It's exactly like the hadith was saying, Allahumma inni as'aluka fi'l al-khayrat, to do the good things, wa tark al-munkarat, and to leave the bad things, wa hubb al-masakin, because you can know الصراط السوي, you can know the right path and not follow it, and you can know the right path but not necessarily be determined on it. You can have a moment, yes, I do know Salah is obligatory, but I miss out on Fajr, I miss out on Dhuhr, I know that it's haram to do this and halal to do this and obligatory to do this, but I don't do it. This is the opposite of hidayah. But to do it is in itself guidance. So when we're looking here, it is important to be aware of two sides. One, Man ashabu الصراط السوي ومن اهتدى. It's important to know who is guided and what is guidance. In order to judge anybody that they're doing the right thing, you first have to know what is the right thing. What is the right thing? What is the right thing? And when we look at Ashabu Sirat al-Sawi, what is guidance? What is guidance? And what is guidance? And what is the right thing to do is all part of knowing who you should accompany as well. Because when you accompany those that are Ashabu Sirat al-Sawi, when you accompany those that are on the right path, you will also be accompanying guidance. But in order to know who is following the right path, you also need to remember you have to know what the right path is. And unfortunately, during our day and age, it's all about, well, don't be judgmental. You're supposed to just accept everybody and tolerate everything as to what people are. In Islam, not quite like that. You have to take a moment. The Prophet ﷺ says in the hadith, in order for you to maintain your iman, لا يأكل طعامك إلا مؤمن. Only allow a mu'min to eat from your food. It doesn't mean that if somebody is not a mu'min or etc., that, oh, I'm not going to listen to them, or I'm not going to have them eat with me, etc. But you actually want to take a moment. You want to take a moment. You want to take a moment to reflect on who is accompanying you during every moment. I'm getting an important phone call, but inshallah, well, it's actually from the clinic, so I have to leave. But inshallah, we'll continue next time. And jazakumullah khairan, everybody. This is the end of Surah Taha. I was thinking of doing Surah Al-Ahzab next week, and either Surah Al-Ahzab or another surah. Allah yarda alayki ya Rabbi. Assalamu alaikum, everyone.